So, Mr. Schubert in Twilight. Obviously, the goal was to not only focus on Schubert at the end of his life, but to really distribute it amongst the genres that he excelled in at the end of his life. It was very important for me. Well, of course, we have a lot of recordings. I don't want to say a lot, but we have some really great recordings of the three last Schubert quartets. And I knew that I wanted to have the Belcher Quartet do this one because this performance was especially memorable for me. And I, of course, will throw in my leader, as I always will. And the Bostridge performance of Winterreise, for those that were there, I mean, it was a really, really memorable, not only performance, but event, in that we had the discussion afterwards and he signed his books after the concert. And then, of course, Jonathan playing the A major sonata, which is just, you know, this just wonderful, bright music, which was funny. I mean, I knew that when I was compiling the show, that it could be a little dark. I was dealing with very dark music and topics for a lot of it. So I knew that I had to end it with something a little bit up from the rest of the show. Any thoughts?
Wonderful variety of music. Incredible. What an expansive end of his life.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, the Death and the Maiden especially. When you hear the Death and the Maiden, people don't focus on this movement. Generally, it's the first movement. When you hear it on the radio, for instance, they'll often play the first movement, but this movement, the slow movement, is the basis of the moniker of Death and the Maiden, since he uses this the theme of the song. And interestingly, he only uses the theme from the death part of the song. So the song is broken in two. I have the text here. It's basically a conversation between the maiden and death. And the maiden says, "Pass by, ah, pass by, away, cruel death. I'm still young, leave me, dear one, and do not touch me." And then death says, "Give me your hand, you lovely, tender creature. I am your friend, and come not to chastise. Be of good courage, I am not cruel. You shall sleep softly in my arms." So Schubert chose to use only the thematic material in the quartet from the death part of the song. So he was really looking for something quite stark. And these the five variations are just incredible and build, and there's a lot of, you know, it's very sparse, the theme. And then it's sort of like almost, I hate to use the analogy, but bolero-esque, where he's just adding and adding and adding, and it's just becomes this very, very dramatic, I believe the fourth variation is just very, very dramatic. And then he simplifies and goes back to major in the last variation. So, any other thoughts about Death and the Maiden? I'll touch on all three pieces. Crickets.
Well, there's this incredible urgency. It's really solemn, but it's so urgent. It's got this incredible drive to it.
There's just this tension is underlying this
building,
very sorrowful. It starts in a very sorrowful manner with the theme, and then it's sort of this impassioned, almost fight against that sorrow that happens, especially in the obbligato. I would say the obbligato violin part, where the three other instruments are sort of moving around, and she's playing sort of variations on the theme above the intensity of the lower instruments.
And also how he uses both major and minor versions of the melodies to it adds such poignancy and such. It's as I think Greg said, it's solemn, but it's not mournful. It's poignant, and it's thoughtful, and it's profound, and it's sad, but it's not it's not tragic. There's a sadness and a poignancy without being. It's not a downer. It's a kind of a. It's hopeful and optimistic in its way. I think I would say in the sadness of it. I mean, that the whole point of, like you were quoting from the lyric, that he's seeing death as not being cruel, but as being kind of natural and touching, and it has to be expected, but it's sad to be departing and giving up and saying goodbye.
I'm not sure I've ever heard a better performance either. It's her just sort of leading the rest of them. I'm not sure I've ever heard a better performance.
I think I've said it here before. I mean, to me, they're the best quartet in the world. I think they're fantastic. And I was mentioning this week about their performance of the Rosamunde Quartet here, which was their first concert in my tenure here, and I think it was October 2014. And I will play some of that for you at some point, maybe not this evening. But the Rosamunde gets sort of short shrift in the three last quartets. It's an incredible piece, and very haunting, and the way that the Belcher goes about their business. I mean, it's such a pleasure. I mean, they're just so wonderful. They're absolutely wonderful. And they did this, I'll harken back to last week. You know, we focused on the early E-flat major quartet of Schubert, and that was the concert that they showed up late and everything. Well, this closed that concert. So this is still, you know, after they've been traveling all day, to play like this. I mean, it's just, you know, it's such a gift. I mean, it's so wonderful, so wonderful. Yeah. Anything else about Death and the Maiden? Well, I wanted to move to Winterreise, which is, you know, one of the true masterpieces of all of classical music, and quite intense subject matter. I wanted to choose songs that I wanted to get songs in the beginning, a song or two in the middle, and then I had to include the end. I had to have Leiermann. Leiermann is one of the most remarkable songs in the entire literature. And, you know, Lindenbaum, I pulled, you know, I quoted Schubert on the show, and that comes from a quote from one of his closest friends wrote after his death, 30 years after his death, about Winterreise. And I'm going to read the whole quote now about his impressions of how Winterreise came about with Schubert. And this is Joseph von Spahn. And he says, "For some time, Schubert appeared very upset and melancholy. When I asked him what was troubling him, he would only say, 'Soon you will hear and understand.' One day he said to me, 'Come over to Schober's today, and I will sing you a cycle of horrifying songs. I am anxious to know what you will say about them. They have cost me more effort than any of my other songs.' So he sang the entire Winterreise's cycle through to us in a voice full of emotion. We were utterly dumbfounded by the mournful, gloomy tone of these songs, and Schubert said that only one of them, Der Lindenbaum, had appealed to him. To this, Schubert replied, quote, 'I like these songs more than all the rest, and you will come to like them as well.'" So you can imagine being at one of these Schubertiadas, and Schubert whips out this, you know, this large cycle of songs, and people there were pretty horrified by them. But he still, you know, he thought that they were the most profound songs that he had ever written.
Derek, I have a question.
Sure.
That quote, does that come, do they play the whole cycle, or was that just the first part that he first did?
Oh, it's the whole cycle, because it refers to Leiermann as well. So the cycle originally,
Okay.
John is speaking to the right, the cycle was originally broken in two, and then was later combined. And I believe Die Post starts the second half, I believe, of the cycle. But the songs, they're just so evocative. I mean, they're just so wonderful. And I wanted to pull up the score Um, and basically just to see the busyness of the writing when the two are there. You know, there's a lot going on in these songs, and this is the beginning of the cycle, the beginning of the cycle. I'm sorry, I have to bring this over here because and then bear with the scroll. Sorry, the zoom is in the way here. Oh, I can move it here, hold on. Then you get to Lyreman toward the end. Sorry, I wanted to have all the songs here. Sorry, I'm making you seasick here. Hold on. Here. So look how spare the writing is. You've got just sustained notes, and this is just the the piano beginning, just sustained, dotted half notes.
We're not seeing
We're not seeing anything.
Seeing your list of your.
Oh my goodness, that's terrible. Hold on, stop share. Hold on. That's someday I will get this all together here. So hold on. Here we go.
There it is.
That's it.
Yeah.
Ta-da. So look how spare the writing is. Look how sparse. He's got dotted half notes in the left hand, and then the tune of the hurdy-gurdy in the right hand. Just for, it's basically 3 bars. It's a 3-bar phrase. It's an unusual phrase. And the writing is just so sparse. And he sort of does that as he's ending the cycle. The last 3 songs of the cycle, the writing is more sparse, and then it gets to their Lyreman, and it's just, you've got the drone in the left hand, and then the hurdy-gurdy, and this haunting melody of this man meeting this mystical figure of the hurdy-gurdy man at the end of his journey. And it's really just stunning. And Bostridge, Bostridge has spent his life and his intellect on this piece throughout his career. He wrote this book, A Winter's Journey, and I suggest that if you don't have it, that you get it. Basically, little essays on each song and what they mean. It's really, really stunning, and to have that kind of commitment from Bostridge is so wonderful. We photographed this concert, and I remember going through the shots, and he would just have these just pained looks on his face as he was singing. Now, Bostridge can do this in general, but especially in this piece in Winterreise, it was just, he was just breathing the text in this performance, and you can hear that obviously in the radio show. It's quite stunning, just stunning. I mean, Winterreise is tough because it's not something you sit at your desk in the afternoon and you just sort of put Winterreise on in the background. It's not one of these things. I mean, it's a real, again, draining. We were talking about that last week, about the late works of Schubert, emotionally draining, and it takes some effort to sit through that. I think in this cycle, I would say in all of classical music, this is one of the most challenging cycles to actually sit through the whole thing and not get the heebie-jeebies. I mean, it's really, really something. And that it was written in 1828, the last year of his life, is just extraordinary. It's extraordinary. Any other thoughts about Mr. Bostridge and Winterreise?
Well, Derek, I have to say that as you, I'm sure you remember, that was the first of 3 great Winterreise performances we got to see that year. The second being Matthias Gerna at Tanglewood. And then you were with us together in New York when we got to see Mark Padmore and Chris Wazedenhout do it in 3 totally different performances of it. I mean, it showed what a great piece of music that was. was that you have three, top line artists bringing their musicality to that really amazing music. And none of them were similar at all. I mean, the music was still the same, and the emotion was still the same, and the impact was still incredible. But to hear three great artists do that was one of the really top musical experiences of my life. And you started it off with this really wonderful performance with Bostridge, and I really thank you for it. And it was really nice to hear these little snippets of it again for the first time. So thank you.
Yeah, it's important for me. I keep on espousing Lieder and my love of Lieder. Lieder, I will be putting this on the radio a lot because Lieder is not heard on the radio very much, and it should be. I'll go a step further, John. The next season, Bostridge, there was a production with videography at Lincoln Center. I forget who the composer. It was a reworking of the Winterreise cycle for orchestra, tenor, and a video installation, which I found not to be that successful. But Ian was great. I'd gone down to Lincoln Center to see him the following season, and it was great to see him. But I think it was written for him, actually. I think it was a premiere. I'm not quite sure. I'd have to look that up. Maybe next week I'll have that information. But yeah, I mean, we speak about that, about listening to different interpretations, and that's wonderful. And to hear Chris Bezuidenhout play it on a forte piano, it's wonderful. It's absolutely wonderful. And then we have Mr. Biss playing the A major. That A major is just an extraordinary piece. It's sort of, I did a little bit of background on the late sonatas. He has the three late sonatas: the C minor, the A major, and the B flat major. And I'd say these days the B flat major is perhaps played the most, and with the A major second and C minor well back third. C minor is not done quite as often. And I did some reading, and I was astonished that those three sonatas were published 10 years after Schubert's life, and nobody really liked them. They thought it wasn't up to his other late works. And even Schumann, there's a quote here from Schumann, which was kind of a condescending comment: "Always musical and rich in song-like themes, these pieces ripple on page after page." Sort of just speaking to their length and not saying about their quality or whatever. But it was only until Arthur Schnabel in the 20th century who championed these works that they came back into the repertoire, which is astounding to me. And they're just so, each one of them is just so marvelous. The B flat major is one of my, I hate to say favorites, but I adore that sonata. I listen to that sonata all the time. And this A major too, and they're quite different, actually, quite different. The A major has a very positive outlook. B flat, there's some beauty and little trouble in the left hand and the trills. But they're really, really extraordinary works. I couldn't believe that they were not well known until Schnabel championed them. Any thoughts about Jonathan's performance?
Wonderful. And you can, the way the mics are placed, you can hear him breathe.
Yeah. You
could just hear him breathe, which was just delightful. You felt like you were sitting, you were turning pages for him. It was great. It was just full of life, really full of life.
We don't give credit on these shows to our recording engineer, who's wonderful.
Yes.
Dan Cernicki. Dan Cernicki is a really, really wonderful recording engineer. And
you were just sitting there right with him.
Yeah, he's
Excellent.
Just a great guy, very helpful, just a really wonderful egg, and I'm very fortunate to have him working with us. I wanted to, do we have any other comments about Jonathan?
Derek, I have a question, and that is going to your intro lead-in, talking about how they weren't performed that often until Schnabel. How often have let's say the last three sonatas, how often have they been played at the series at Union College since, do you know?
B flat major predominantly. And that's not to say, well, let me, before I start spouting out answers, I have history only going back to 2001 at the series. The series has been going since '69, and I'm working on culling that information. And that's not to say we recorded everything, but in my database, the B flat major shows up quite a bit. A major occasionally, and C minor I think only once in the last 20 years. So not that often. Not that often. Again, they're very large works. I mean, these are, these late Schubert works are 50-minute works, all of them. And we're not even talking about the 3 piano pieces either, which have also appeared on the series. I think last with Mitsuko a few years back. But yeah, they're just big. And if when you program these sonatas, it devours your program. It really does. So you're second, and you have to be, smart about programming, and that usually if you're programming these works, you've got to make a first half that's a little bit, I don't want to say lighter, but just not so much, we'll say, as far as emotional, I speak to it being draining. I mean, they're really these things that these pieces are really emotionally draining in a good way. I mean, please drain me. But in speaking of like what's not often heard on the series, I pulled a recording out from, let me see, I have it here, from 2006 of the Florestan Trio. And I thought, we haven't done the piano trios, the 2 piano trios in a long time on the series. And it's something that I need to rectify. They're both written in this period, both enormous over 50-minute, 55-minute pieces. But I burned the recording of the Florestan Trio, which features, oh goodness, Anthony Marwood, good Lord, Anthony Marwood, Susan Tomes, and Richard Lester on cello. So I wanted to, let's give a listen to the second movement of the Schubert first trio. And it's also, well, anyway, I won't preface it. We'll just talk about it afterwards, but it's on. And here we go. Wow. Let me, so here's this guy in the depths of despair, and he writes that. You know, it's, that's one of the most beautiful slow movements of Schubert. Uses an unusual framework for this movement. Anybody guess?
Leave it on. Just turn it up. Put it on.
Well, it's kind of like a scherzo movement because it has a trio, what seems to be a trio in the middle of it.
It's kinda. I mean, he's messing with the binary form ABA.
Yeah.
But he adds a C.
Yeah.
So he's got this, you know, one could argue that there's that C is a transition back to A, but I think it's its own entity. He's got the A part in major, and then he goes to minor, and then C is in, I believe, the dominant major, and then in the recapitulation, when the violin starts I'm sorry, not recapitulation, when the return to the theme comes, it's in the violin instead of the cello. Yeah, I mean, it's such a and he uses a device dynamically a lot in that movement. Anybody want to venture a guess? Something happens with the dynamics over and over again. Beethoven liked to do this very well. It's a swell and then subito piano. Da, da, dee, da, 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 da. So you swell right when you think it's going to climb, and then you just subito piano, and it just disappears to nothing.
Mic is on.
And he does it over and over again in this theme to great effect, where it's just, you know, this, again, just floats and just drifts, and it's this just sheer beauty that's just keeps going and going and going.
I'd have to listen to it again as far as the structure you were, you know, talking about, you know, like the A, B, A, C, you know, and then kind of like the C. You know, kind of like my one sort of reflexive, you know, feeling was that like he landed it pretty quickly in E flat major and kind of nicely, and I hadn't really, sounds dramatic, but like I hadn't really recovered from like all like of the emotional turmoil and in that sort of middle section when he was, you know, kind of, you know, fluttering in and out of major and minor. It ended quickly, and my knee-jerk reaction was like, I'm kind of not ready to, you know, be kind of like satisfied and happy. It's still, there was still a lot of tempest that we just went through. So maybe the structure added to that somehow.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. In school, we used to say that, you know, you study modulation with Schubert and orchestration with Schumann, because they both did it almost haphazardly. Like the Schubert doesn't really prepare you a lot when he modulates. He just, bam, he modulates, and it just goes from there. He changes key. You know, orchestration, speaking to Schumann's, it's just he wrote for the piano for the orchestra. Yeah. Not unlike Chopin. But yeah, I mean, again, I could have done 4 shows, 5 shows, 6 shows on late Schubert if I had the material. You know, there's so much great, I mean, just masterpieces written in the last 3 years of Schubert's life. It's I mean, the sheer just output of those masterpieces is just unheard of in music history.
Well, and you haven't even touched on the cello quintet.
No.
Arguably the greatest of all.
Arguably.
and which I know it's been played a few times in recent years, at least a couple times that I can think of at the series.
The last time was the season before I arrived in 12-13.
Yeah, the Jupiter did it. I remember.
Yes,
right?
exactly, with Denise Jokic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Schubert cello quintet is, as John said, considered to be greater than all of the chamber works. It's just, the pinnacle of chamber music writing, of maybe all writing. But yeah, it's, again, you could spend many lifetimes listening to the different recordings of these works. I go back to the trio recordings. This performance. What did you think about the performance?
I was particularly struck by how beautiful the piano playing of Susan Tomes is. She's really is really a wonderful piano playing. I wasn't getting the full beauty of the string sounds, maybe because because of the recording of the technology, but they're obviously a fine trio. Just the other totally unrelated comment is, and probably not true, but when Schubert had a good thing, he liked to hold on to it. He doesn't let go for
milk
quite
it, baby, milk it. Yes, yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think the recording, the placement of, this is well before my time. I didn't think the recording quality was fantastic. What else? Anybody else?
It was a lovely performance. It's great to hear those trios, which you don't get to hear them often enough, as you said at the very beginning. It's really sad that we can't hear them more.
I tell you, trios are tough. It's so different than a string quartet, because the musicians are naked playing, and when the musicians aren't equal in skill level, you hear it immediately. And I tell young musicians all the time, form a trio, because there's a dearth of trios out there. There's one that I'm looking at, which I won't name, that hopefully I will bring, because the repertoire is there's such great repertoire for piano trio, and very meaningful repertoire for all of the composers, pretty much. But I've been very picky with piano trio, because again, the repertoire is so amazing that you just want it done really well. This trio, Florestan, disbanded maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It's, I think they had some issues with one another, and they disbanded. They were all very successful. Anthony Marwood is an incredible violinist. He comes over here every year in the summer to play at Yellow Barn in Vermont, and does solo work. I believe the Addis violin concerto was written for him. He's a very fine fiddle player. Any other thoughts about the performance? Any specifics about the performance? Like, dislike, indifferent?
Enjoyed it.
You enjoyed it?
Yeah.
I thought it was lovely. I had some issue with the phrasing of the trio, that things were in very small phrases and it wasn't very broadly phrased. What I speak to it like a sense of legato, where there's a continuous line going all the way through to the phrase, and sometimes it was a little disjointed, but I think overall it was a very good performance. Very good performance. These trios, it's the pinnacle. I mean, you've got a piano trio, you've got these two pieces, you've got the Dvorak, F minor, you've got Schumann, all the Beethoven, my favorite Beethoven, Archduke, of course, everybody loves the Archduke trio, but if you seek out Opus 70 number 2, which is often overshadowed by Opus 70 number 1, which is the Ghost trio, but seek out Opus 70 number 2. That is a very fine piano trio, really fine piano trio. I've got one more recording, because you just can't just jump in and jump out of late Schubert and cover it all in 1 hour. I've played a recording from this recital previously. This is Mark Padmore and Jonathan Biss on the same program as the A major sonata. And last time we listened to, when I was playing Guess the Composer, it was pretty much the doppelganger from Schubert's Gesang. And this is an earlier song. Rellstab was the poet. In der Ferne, which means far away. Okay, so let's hear Mark Padmore and Jonathan Biss. This is March 12th, 2017. Here we go.
Sonnenstrahl eilender
So, Marty.
This recording very much. It's fuller. It was not so tinny as some of the others. I don't know what he said, but that was all right.
So, yeah.
I really liked it.
Other thoughts about the performance before we get into the piece?
He can just do it all. He's just, you know, I find Bostrich a little autistic. You know, he's just got this incredibly narrow focus, but Padmore, just his voice is just monstrous, and it just is so moving to me. I don't know, I don't know what he's saying either, but it doesn't matter. He just moves me.
Yeah.
It's just he just moves me.
I'll get into what the song is about.
Yeah.
Anyone else about Mr. Padmore or perhaps Mr. Biss? Let us know.
Well, both of them. Both of them. They're just one voice. They're absolutely one voice.
Yeah, it makes a big difference in any partnership, be it musical or otherwise, that we have, you know, that these musicians have great experiences performing together, a vast experience. Mark and Jonathan have worked quite a bit and continue to work quite a bit with one another. And conversely, with Bostrich in those recordings, that wasn't his regular pianist. And I think it showed a little bit in those performances. But when you have a partner that just breathes with you, and that speaks to any ensemble in quartet playing as well, when you're just all breathing and playing together, the results are just, I mean, they're extraordinary. I think, you know, Mark has a large palette of color in his voice, I'll say. And, you know, all of these singers, whether you are drawn to their voice or not, what I look for in a singer is leader, people who really focus on leader in their careers and are committed firmly to the text and that they want to evoke the text. I don't really book a lot of opera singers singing leader. And when I do, it's those who have extensive experience in singing leader and don't squeeze in a leader recital between two operas that they're doing at the Met. I had a very interesting conversation with Simon Keenly's side over a drink about that very notion, that it's just such a different beast that he has to adjust his voice and train his voice over time to do leader. You just can't just jump in and out of it and then, you know, dial it up. He said for opera, putting steel in his voice. That's how he had described it, which I found very interesting. But yeah, Mark is extraordinary. Mark is extraordinary, and I'm crossing fingers and can't wait for his April concert with Mitsuko Uchida next year.
Derek, on that subject, you might mention that people have, I think, 6 more days to hear Padmore and Uchida do Winterreise at Wigmore Hall. They did the recording a month ago, and it's available until the 26th, a week ago, this coming Sunday. And you can watch it free online at Wigmore Hall Live. And there was a final concert of their series of free concerts in June. So it would be a great opportunity to hear 2 fabulous artists sing that music, do that music.
Yes, thanks, John. I mean, that was just such a wonderful, wonderful concert. My goodness, when you pair musicians like that who are so deeply, they just care so much. Mitsuko, it's funny, I had sent her a text after that performance and just basically expressing what a gift it is to have them both and everything. And she said that, you know, for her, it's been such a gift to work with Mark over this time and how much she's learned from Mark. You know, and that's kind of speaks to what I'm talking about, that, you know, these musicians continue to be curious and want to be influenced and influenced. You know, it's just wonderful. This song, well, before I get into the text, what was unique about the tonality of this song? Or the tonal structure, I guess. I don't want to get... Was it a major? Was it a minor?
Hard to tell.
Hard to tell.
Yeah.
I know, we listened. I'm sorry that I got into this so late after hearing it. So this song is in 3 stanzas. And the first 2 are in minor. And the last is in major. And then he ends at the last second in minor. He reiterates the 3rd stanza, and he's floating in major, floating in major, and then he has the tenor ends and the piano cadences in minor. Very unique, very, very unique. So this song, I won't go, well, maybe I will read the poetry word for word. Woe to those who flee, who journey forth into the world, who travel through strange lands, forgetting their native land, spurning their mother's home, forsaking their friends. Alas, no blessing follows them on their way. The yearning heart, the tearful eye, endless longing turning homewards, the surging breast, the dying lament, the evening star, twinkling and sinking without hope. Now the last stanza, whispering breezes, gently ruffled waves, darting sunbeams, lingering nowhere, send her who broke my faithful heart with pain, greetings from one who is fleeing and journeying forth into the world. Good stuff. Rellstab is, you know, he's one of the more important German poets of his time. So it's, you know, that's why I love Lieder. You know, you join these art forms together. It's just extraordinary. So wonderful. Any other thoughts on this evening? And Mr. Schubert?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of like a, you know, like I don't have like a very learned ear as far as Lieder, but I love going back and forth between, you know, Lieder and, you know, just solo piano or Lieder and quartet. And you really can, you start to hear everything as like Lieder or as like, you know, just the sung, you know, word. It reminds me a little bit of, you know, like if I'm listening to Mozart opera and then I go and I listen to even a full-scale symphony or a concerto or something, like everything starts to sound like aria to me, and I can start to hear, you know, like individual voices, and everything becomes conversational. And it was interesting, you know, Schumann's comment, like, oh yeah, he just goes page after page, as if it's easy to write just like endless, unforgettable, like, you know, lyricism and melody and you know, just tunes that are going to stick in your head, and full conversations that can stick in your head. That's very, you know, I mean, there's a lot of composers, each of which have their strengths, but there's many great composers that I wouldn't call like great at writing melody in the way that Schubert is in his songs and in all of his different works. And it's, I like just the juxtaposition of you know, of the sung, you know, word with other pieces that he wrote.
In fairness to Schumann, Schumann was a great champion of Schubert and really promoted his works. You know, I referred to the Ninth Symphony last week, but he just didn't dig these pieces. So I don't think he was besmirching Schubert at his length in writing. I just don't think he got these piano sonatas. And maybe that makes a bit of sense because Schumann really excelled at miniatures. And these are just these vast landscapes of works for the keyboard that maybe he couldn't wrap his head around. I mean, he wasn't alone, apparently. So, but wow. Yeah, I mean, the A major sonata, Radu Lupu, is a great recording. Mitsko's B flat recording is epic, I will say. It's an epic recording. You know, all the great Schubert players, you know, Schnabel, all of those recordings, you know, they're wonderful. They're so wonderful, so wonderful. And we haven't, you know, I would love to, I tried, I'll tell you, I'll confess something. In 21, 22, I've been trying to put the Schubert octet together, and I just failed. It's just hard, you know, when you add all these bodies and everything. So, but that work too. Trout quintets. These, you know, they're all. We're so lucky to have all these, and this is just this one guy who lived to 31.
Huh? Couldn't do it. All right.
Yeah, just couldn't. You know, this happens a lot. You know, you try to do things, and sometimes it takes a few years. Something you just got to keep plugging away, and sometimes the stars have to align correctly. So I just, look, it's easy for me to put it together. I can get a quartet, slap wind players together, bam, we got a Schubert octet. I don't do that. I'm very careful about how I put things together. So, and with musicians who want to and have collaborated before and have played together before, just as what I spoke to previously about, you know, being used to one another and breathing together. So it goes. I'll get there.
You mean you didn't find the right combination of musicians?
Correct. I started with the germ of the idea with the quartet, and they had made some suggestions which I had approved of who they've worked with and who they wanted to work with, and just schedules, we couldn't work it out. So
I missed the name, the title of the song. You said it, you told us what it was, but I missed it. What was it?
In der Ferne.
In your Ferne.
In der Ferne, far away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was trying to think what might have been the opposite of that song in terms of music. I know it sounds silly, whether it's a song or an opera thing, and I was thinking of Non più andrai.
Perhaps. Perhaps. Any other thoughts for the evening?
Good evening.
Thank you very much again, Derek.
Thanks, Derek.
Thank you, everybody. Next week, Mr. Chopin.
Well, I can.
So we've got a lot of selections, some from Raphael Blehash, Emmanuel Axe, and some others. I forget off the top of my head, but another interesting show. So thanks everybody for coming tonight, and we'll see you next week.
Good night.
Okay.
Bye.
Derek, take care.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Do you have anything by Malkuzinski playing Chopin?
By whom?
Malkuzinski.
No.
He was supposed to be a great Chopin performer.
I'll look into it. I don't know him or
Yeah.
her.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.